My name is Greg Pryor, and I have had the privilege and pleasure to be at Workday for nearly 7 years, doing work across 3 areas. First, as a member of our People and Purpose team, applying Workday technology to ensure that our nearly 12,000 workmates are having a remarkable Workday experience. I've also had the opportunity to work across our fantastic customer community with organizations like Dell and spending time with great leaders like Karen Kavanagh, pollinating ideas and connections across our customer community. And finally, I've had the opportunity to work with thought leaders like my friend John Boudreau, both of whom will be joining us for today's conversation. About 5 years ago, I had the pleasure to join Professor Boudreau when he convened about 50 thought-leading CHROs to look 10 years into the future and imagine the future of work and how HR would need to respond to that future. We captured part of that work in the first essay of the book, Black Holes and White Spaces, where we used a classic scenario planning model to look at a series of highly likely and highly impactful factors. We clustered and mapped those into a series of potential future states. In the scenarios shared in the book, we mapped the impact of the democratization of work with technology empowerment and defined those 4 potential future states. 5 years into our 10-year scenario forecast, the current crises have accelerated these 2 dimensions. As we look at the alphabet of classic recovery scenarios, a V, a U, a W, we seem to be experiencing what I would call a K-shaped recovery, especially across the technology dimension. We see those companies who have been investing in their digital infrastructure generally thriving and definitely surviving, while those who went into the pandemic on their back foot are candidly likely getting left behind. In fact, according to a July 2020 McKinsey report, the crisis has accelerated an already existing trend. Between December of 2018 and May of 2020, the top quintile of companies grew its market implied economic profit by $335 billion, while the bottom quintile of companies lost a staggering $303 billion. During a recent quarterly earnings call, Microsoft's CEO said that they have seen, and we've all seen, 2 years worth of digital transformation in the past 2 months. This COVID chasm is creating a rapidly expanding digital divide of the disconnected and the digitally enabled. I was leading a session with a number of CHROs in South Africa, and one shared this incredibly poignant perspective, saying, while we in fact are all in the same storm, each one of us is in very different boats. And while much of the world has quickly adapted to the current situation, unfortunately we are seeing a disproportionate impact on our frontline workers, our young workers living alone at home in cities, and our female co-workers, specifically those with care responsibilities, as just a few examples. The research suggests that lagging organizations still struggling to respond to the crisis need to make some really bold moves, while leading organizations have a unique opportunity to accelerate their advantage and widen the competitive gap even further. For those leading organizations positioned to move from recovery to reinvent, we hear 5 business and talent imperatives that we think are about these ideas for a changing world: inclusion, digitalization, enabling experiences, the agile organization, and the skills imperative. Let's start with the lifeblood of our organizations, our people. Organizations who innovate, serve customers, and deliver critical outcomes better than their competitors have employees who feel a deep sense of belonging and commitment. Organizations need to be great places to work for all. Unfortunately, for many organizations, these outcomes have not met their intentions. According to a June 2020 McKinsey report, almost half of their respondents do not feel very included in their organization. That same report found that most employees, regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation, said that they had encountered barriers to a sense of inclusion at their organization. And 39% of respondents say that they have taken their organization's inclusiveness into account when making career decisions. In my experience, we are seeing the opportunity to use digital technology to increasingly personalize and curate talent practices and programs that meet all people where they are. While this was an imperative going into the pandemic, organizations and leaders need to step up and address both the physical and mental well-being of their workforce in an extraordinary way. Scaling this level of personalization requires the next level application of digitalization. While we have digitized information, processes, and practices, I believe that we have only begun leveraging the democratization of data with the power of machine learning to automate and elevate human performance. If you are less familiar with machine learning, I would recommend that you read the book Prediction Machines by 3 economists at the University of Toronto, who do a wonderful job of explaining the economic advantages of applying machine learning to predictions. At Workday, we have been applying this technology to predict what skills you have, what learning recommendations could address your skill interests, who would be a great mentor, what's a next great career move, or which internal gig would help you build your desired skills. While it sounds like the domain of technologists, it really is imperative for HR leaders. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to spend time with a number of CHROs and human capital thought leaders at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab to discuss the impact of AI and ML. I personally walked away from that meeting with 3 clear imperatives. First, that machine learning was about to dramatically change the nature of work, automating components of roles, and that HR needed to be on the front line of architecting work, helping the workforce to automate and elevate essential human capabilities. The second outcome was how machine learning would fundamentally augment significant components of HR, creating the space for transforming and enabling HR to enable us to lead the future of work. And the third area was to ensure that our organizations are practicing responsible AI. In a similar way to our customer experience, this digitalization and democratization of data now positions our organizations to reinvent the enabling experiences they can and will need to provide to their employees. Increasingly, employees will apply their consumer experiences to the workplace, expecting to be surprised and delighted with a learning recommendation, mentoring connection, or a short internal gig assignment that will help them grow their highest priority skills. They will expect us to enable their performance with alerts, recommendations, and reminders. They will expect us to coach, inform, and enroll them in programs based on their jobs, skills, and experience level. They will expect to ask a question in real language, not HR speak, and get a thoughtful answer from that AI. They will even expect their HR systems to ask them questions in order to help them. Again, designing around the employee, we will contemplate and create journeys, nudges, and reminders. And based on our employees' specific context, such as I'm in a new role, I'm a new people leader, I'm hiring a person, I'm taking a leave, or I'm moving to a new country. People will be looking for their organization to predict the content that will most likely help them curate that content in the flow of work. Similar to our consumer experience, this experience will be both push and pull, considering both the organization and the individual's needs. Imagine embedding and extending your best HR expertise into a system, then letting an employee's context automatically trigger that enabling action to help keep that employee on the right course. Automating and augmenting work by extending expertise enables the level of agility that's required in today's new world of work. To enable our growth and culture at Workday, we survey our entire workforce every Friday on what we call Feedback Friday. And while it was not a question to safeguard our employees' well-being with remote work when the pandemic happened, we knew from our Feedback Friday data that our efforts to support our home-based workers were well-placed. And in fact, our home-based workers were having a slightly better employee experience than those who would traditionally go into an office. Immediately following the move to remote work, we pivoted our Feedback Friday platform, which is on Workday, to understand and share employees' needs with their people leaders practically overnight. More broadly, following the pandemic, organizations need to understand the skills and capabilities of their workforce in order to redeploy workers against the most critical or even brand new work. I won't steal the thunder of my friend John Boudreau, who will talk about how organizations rapidly considered the skills they had and shifted from building cars to building ventilators, or from making underwear to making PPE, or how the People Plus Work Connect effort helped airport mechanics redeploy from a consumer products company who needed to surge their truck fleet with a group of mechanics who were able to keep the supply chain going. The opportunity to have work experiences that grow the new skills, providing career optionality, was already becoming a worker expectation. And now it is deeply cemented in our work narratives about how we build the resilience and the resourcefulness to survive and hopefully thrive during the next great uncertainty. I believe that skills or capabilities are the new career currency that activates those first four imperatives. An organization's graph of its skills and capabilities become the connective fabric to delivering work. Much the way HTML democratized the world's information through the interoperability of the internet, imagine a human performance markup language, or HPML, that enables broad interoperability of people and work across talent marketplaces. Through the democratization of data and machine learning advancements, we can now infer employees' skills and skill strength. Imagine understanding what skills people have and want, and then curating that work to them. For example, a machine learning algorithm could review a patient's health record and predict the healthcare team that has the capabilities and connections with the greatest likelihood to help cure that patient. We can use that same fabric to understand the capability and content to grow required skills. Fortunately, this is coming at just the right time as we face a growing skill gap imperative. The World Economic Forum estimates that due to changes in technology and economic drivers, that 42% of jobs will require different skills in just the next 3 years. And over 1 billion workers will need reskilling by the year 2030. In addition to helping address the skills shortage, we're optimistic about the democratization of skills and work matching capabilities to empower a skills-based economy that values skills over degrees, results over roles, and creates opportunity on-ramp for historically disadvantaged talent by valuing what you know over who you know. Let me share a quick example, very practical, of how these ideas come together. Let me take my good friend and workmate, Phil Wilburn, who heads and leads Workday's people analytics capability. Following the 4 steps defined in John's book, Phil has very thoughtfully decomposed his job into work components and required skills. To optimize his contribution and give him the greatest agility, he thinks about where his work falls across strategic and incremental value, and where the work can be automated versus what's essential human work. As Phil does this, some work disappears or gets delegated. In this approach, he has productized and automated high-value solutions that enable scale, and he increases the time he now spends on the work that drives the greatest and most strategic value. The work that Phil has automated not only increases his agility capacity by elevating high-value human work, but improves the employee experience for others. As an example, Phil has digitized the creation of quarterly Feedback Friday reports using robotic process automation, or RPA, that automatically lets leaders know how this quarter compared to the last and curates improvement opportunities that are personalized to enable their teams. Interestingly enough, I can't tell you how many thank you notes that my friend Phil gets from our leaders going on about how much they appreciate the time that he has spent on creating this highly customized report. And my good friend Phil doesn't have the heart to tell them that, in fact, he spent literally no time on creating this report, but in fact, it was a Philbot. While many suggest that this pandemic has accelerated us, 5 to 10 years into the future of work, I believe the opportunity to lean in now and address this imperative on those things that are most important to you and your organization promises to pay significant returns. To explore how to do that, I could not be more thrilled to invite two friends and pioneers in this space to join me today to discuss these ideas and how skills can unlock the future. Joining me are Karen Cavani and Dr. John Boudreau. Karen is the Chief HR Technologist for Dell Technologies, where she focuses on the future of work, enabling talent optimization, and boosting the digital employee experience. I recently had the privilege to spend some time with Karen and the Dell team, and I am so impressed with the great work that they are doing. John is a recognized worldwide expert, leading evidence-based visionary on the future of work and organization. Through breakthrough research on the bridge between work, superior human capital leadership, and sustainable competitive advantage. John has published more than 50 books and articles, and his research has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, and Business Week. John, I'm going to begin with you, my friend. You are a pioneer and a thought leader on the future of work and human capital management. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the effects that you're seeing this current remarkable context having on your views around the future of work?
Well, I think everyone is saying we're moving 10 years in 6 months, or pick your number of years, pick your number of months. The larger the first one and the smaller the second one, the better. So I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but I do know that we've seen things accelerate that we never would have expected. So I think, Greg, in a nutshell, the simplest idea is there are lots of ideas that we're going to talk about the future of work. And almost every single one of them has moved that way. It's moved exponentially faster than anyone thought it would.
Yeah, just incredible. Karen, let me ask you a similar question. How has today's current context impacted your work, maybe your thinking and the approach of the team at Dell?
Yeah, I agree with John. Now more than ever, we are seeing the intersection of demand for emerging technology to prepare for the future of work meet a marketplace that is growing, maturing, and delivering the right solutions for its customers in this moment. And it's very exciting for HR teams who are ready to elevate the employee experiences for our organizations.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I do think, and we had talked about in the past, such an incredible opportunity right now, such an opportunity to really be leaning in, and want to talk a little bit more about that. John, I'm going to turn it back to you for a moment. In your book, which I am, as you know, a big fan of, Reinventing Jobs, one of the things that I really appreciate is about how you are so incredibly practical and explicit about describing the steps to automate and enable the future of work. Could you take a couple of minutes and talk about really your vision for the roles that skill has in that reinvention of jobs?
Happy to. Thank you, Greg. And let me give all due credit on the book Reinventing Jobs to my co-author, Ravin Jesuthasan, who you can look up, accomplished speaker and a leader at Willis Towers Watson. And in that book, we talked about something very related to skills, I think, Greg. So that book was designed to illustrate and bring home the point that, number one, it's almost never automation replacing people. Virtually never, and probably it's safe to say to your viewers, if that's what you're doing, you're probably making a mistake, and you'll probably look back on it and regret it. And so instead, it's people plus automation. And then the second thing that we talked about in that book was the idea that you can't see the patterns unless you're willing to essentially deconstruct or atomize these things we call jobs. So on the one hand, on the work side, let's call it, that book talked a lot about the need to deconstruct a job into its pieces. Let's call them tasks, or some people might call them projects, and then reconstruct the work, allowing the pieces almost to kind of fall where they will, and then look at what you have. And very often what you have is a job that now is 70% human and 30% automation. And so we called that reinventing jobs, basically. And then, of course, there's also extraordinary effects on teams, on social networks, and of course on the organization itself that we also talk about. Now, let me answer your question finally here. On the other side of the equation is what I might call the worker, and I want to avoid the term employee because I think that also is something that gets people into a box. But if we think about the worker, in the same way, the worker could be deconstructed in a sense. And what I see skills representing is one of a couple of ways to look at workers, and instead of looking at them as someone who holds a job or someone who is about to move on to the next job, the skills that that individual has, I might call it capabilities, are a deconstructed way to look at them. And again, once you do that, you can see patterns about how the skills on the one side and the work tasks on the other side might go together. And the thing that people need to be brave about is that may not end up looking like a job and a job holder when you're done.
Yeah, no, and I love that phrase, what people need to be brave about. And I do think not only is it a brave new world, but people are going to have to be courageous because some of those things do feel threatening. You and I have talked about this idea of sort of capabilities being the new career currency, and that people's ability to understand the capabilities that they have or the skills they have, be really much more intentional about what they're developing and understanding how those fit into the types of work they want to do. Are you seeing other examples of where people are thinking about those capabilities more intentionally?
Sure. I think there's really, to be honest, a kind of a cottage industry beginning to grow up. People have rediscovered some things like there's a website people can go to called O*net. And O*net is a long-standing web page, a long-standing resource that many of us who are researchers have used for decades and decades. And it was originally built to help design jobs. But what it has is lots of deconstructed elements of what they call occupations. Now, O*net has one, the European Union has one, World Economic Forum has done work on this. And so I would say you're absolutely right that this concept of a deconstructed person and the idea that the way to get at that deconstruction is to look at something like skills has really come to the fore now. And I think we're going to see a great deal of work in the next several years developing what some people are calling ontologies or dictionaries about what those skills are and how people can tap into them. To be honest, I think we're at a kind of point of transition. I think pretty soon it won't make sense for humans to do that work. It'll make a lot more sense for algorithms and AI to watch the transactions and infer the skills that may be hidden and not measured yet.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. And I know, Karen, you have been very deeply involved in thinking about skills, the types of ontologies that John has just talked about. How do you see skills and skill insights really helping to activate and optimize talent within your organization?
We start by listening to our workforce. Our employees are asking, which next role is right for me? Who could mentor me to be part of my career development? Or I'd like to explore an internal short-term gig tied to my career interests. What might be a good fit? And meanwhile, our leaders are asking, what are the skill gaps in my organization that might impact delivering on my strategic goals? Or I'm shifting to a non-traditional talent pool for hiring. HR, can you support me? And within HR ourselves, talent acquisition wants to find qualified candidates based on their skills. HR business partners want to understand the talent and skills pipeline. Compensation, they're already thinking about market pricing jobs based on skills. And what do all these questions and needs have in common? Skills. We do see skills as the new currency in this digital economy. And within a modern skills ecosystem, skill insights are the secret sauce to talent optimization. And machine learning and AI activate the skill insights.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you're probably already living that you've already got pretty well moving into practice some of the things that John has been talking about, the application of machine learning. And I know we'll talk in a couple of moments about the early adopter work that you're doing specifically with Workday's talent marketplace that does use those same some of those same technologies. But is it fair to say that you've already started to experiment and to explore and to apply some of the things John just talked about?
Absolutely. And we're seeing real momentum within the organization. Our CHRO, Steve Price, is all in with our skills ecosystem strategy. We are finding that it's going to be a journey for us, because we know that there are really three components to be ready and really accelerate in this space. It's technology readiness. As Workday continues to expand and enable new capabilities, we're going to be there waiting and ready for it. It's data readiness. We know we need tons and tons of data to really activate the machine learning algorithm even more. And finally, last but certainly not least, is cultural readiness. How can we prepare our organizations for skills as the new currency? And so that work is going on now as we incrementally turn on new things like the talent marketplace to really be positioned for success.
Both Workday and Dell had the opportunity to be some of the early adopters in the talent marketplace. And I have to say how incredibly impressed I was that you all seem to be really even ahead of this early adopter. You were almost a pioneer amongst the pioneers. It was just so impressive. And now I have some greater insight into that, knowing how you really thought about the readiness of that, your intentionality, and that you clearly are all in and have created pull for this within your organization, where I know there are some people who are concerned that they need to push this, but I've just been so impressed with the pull that you seem to have created. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways that you're doing that. John, I'm gonna turn it back to you. And Karen talked a little bit about this a moment ago. You have been talking about the opportunity for things like a talent marketplace for as long as I've known you. I'll say a while, but at least as long as I've known you. Can you share a little bit around what your vision and what you envision for this idea of talent marketplace, whether that be within a company or potentially across companies?
It's a good point, and thank you, Karen, for, I think, what did you say? Technology, data, and culture is a great organizing framework, I think, for some of what we're talking about. I think one thing I would emphasize, Greg, is that I really respect and appreciate the skills idea. And I'm gently prodding the profession and leaders to also think about the other side and to make sure that technology, data, and culture are also ready for the deconstructed parts of the work. And Karen, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but very often that's exactly what pioneers like you mean, because the skills concept sort of captures the deconstruction of both sides. However, I'm also seeing, to be honest, an amazing amount of attention to skills. And I know that in a lot of organizations, the best way to begin is to create a talent marketplace for these things we call employees, and to limit the talent marketplace to people who have this thing we call an employment contract. However, when I've watched organizations do that, it isn't very long before they realize that once you begin to open up that kind of marketplace, there are other kinds of workers that you can begin to tap, whether it's freelancers or contractors or volunteers or borrowing people from other organizations. And one of the things that's happened with COVID is all of those things became much more common when organizations tried to pivot from things like making auto parts to making masks.
Yeah. No, I think to your point, I mean, the agility required by organizations, people thinking about those skills, and you and I, in preparation for this meeting and just general geek out sessions, talk about the fact that the genie to some degree is out of the bottle. The horse has left the stable. Whatever your analogy is, the reality is we have actually been working for 8 to 10 to 12 months based on where in the world we live in a gig economy. We're doing much more self-directed work, many of us, than we have done in the past, and so it's probably not realistic to swing backward on that. So Karen, let me ask you, because I think obviously a brilliant point, your idea up front around starting with the employees, asking people, positioning this as ways to help them. You have been an early adopter, as I mentioned earlier, of Workday's talent marketplace. How has it helped you optimize talent in your organization, and where do you see it going from here?
Yeah. Dell Technologies was the first customer to go live with Talent Marketplace, which we were thrilled about. And it's been a big hit for our team members. About a year ago, we launched the pilot within our HR services organization, and we've since expanded it to their business units. And as word gets out of the goodness that comes from the career development opportunities, fantastic feedback that we receive from gig owners and gig workers, organizations around the company are jockeying to get in line to roll out Talent Marketplace for their teams. And we've learned a lot from the pilot. We've incorporated policy, process, and tool updates to enhance the program. Example of each for policy, we needed to create a policy because it's just a brand new world. We engaged our compliance and legal team as a work stream from the start. Very tactical feedback, but it was a great move. And we now have a policy that the gig must fit into the current workload. In terms of process, we learned that we need to actively manage at the program level the gigs and review them before they get posted to make sure that they're of the right quality, they have the right tone, and they're interesting and enticing and fit the bill. And from a tool perspective, listening to those customers, we've tweaked the workflow approval process to make it simpler to move forward. And I will add, the Talent Marketplace has taken us forward in terms of cultural readiness in that skills ecosystem. We have seen just a real spike in skills, what our team members have declared as their skills. They want to get matched with gigs, and they are now seeing and learning that the more skills that they have, the more opportunity they see the match. So it's just a great incentive to really build out that rich set of data when there's something enticing for a team member to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a positive virtuous cycle, to your point. The more you give, the more you get. The more you share and get, reflection, endorsements, support, feedback on the work you're doing, the more it enables more interesting, maybe more refined, more relevant gigs to come at people. And there's a positive virtuous cycle to that. I do have to, again, credit you. Full disclosure, I was always a little jealous. We aspired to be our own first and best customer with some of the technology, and you and your team were always out ahead of us. And honestly, I couldn't figure it out. I think
we're not
pretty
competitive at all. So
we are pretty good. I am competitive, I would say, but and again, I'd point out for people who are on that journey, the intentionality by which you thought about creating pull. One of the things that we happened to do at Workday was sort of follow your lead on that and be really specific about what it is and what it isn't. That it's not just turn the spigot on and move to a cross-organization capability, but we actually framed our initial pilot in the context of what we call a career sprint or a heat experience. And so we framed that in the context of something people were already familiar with. They already had assignments or opportunities to grow their capabilities and grow their connections. And this became a way really to democratize that. So it wasn't really around just who I knew, it was around what I knew. And the opportunity for those skills, and John, I may use that to tee up the next question for you, because I know you've been really passionate about this. The technology became an incredible accelerator of things that we had already been trying to do in a less digitized world. And so, John, I'm gonna ask you. You've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. How do you see technology playing a role either in automating work or in enabling some of these types of platforms and marketplaces to come about?
Well, thanks. I think, again, just a terrific discussion. And I'm going to put in one plug, Greg. One of the things you and I have been talking about, and that I'm very hot on, if we can find a way, is the idea of studying these things. So I must say, listening to you and Karen, it is absolutely fascinating to hear in this practical world. And I've always said, folks like you do the hard work, and I have the best job in the world because you'll tell me about it, and then I'll write about it, and then other people will say, John's really smart. How does he think of these things? So thank you in advance. And Greg, one of the things we've said is you at Workday are creating an ecosystem. And as we see the first movers like Dell begin to get more exposure, as people begin to recognize what's happening, the evolution of this thing is going to be just fascinating. And perhaps that brings me to the answer to your question. I think in terms of automation and work, let's do that first. Some of the principles are things like it's almost never replacing a person in an entire job. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't replacement. And Robin and I kind of said that when you look at I'm going to call them let's call them the tasks. I need not quite the skills on the work side. When you look at those tasks and you take them apart and you look at how automation might affect them, or if you think about our earlier book, even how would other kinds of engagement like freelancers or contractors affect them? When you look at those pieces, the fact is that sometimes you're going to have a hard discussion because something is better done by automation. There are things that AI does lots better than people. None of us wants to still go to the library and try to find a book. We're pretty happy with Google, but it did make a big shift in what we meant by an information professional. So there is replacement, but then there's also augmentation, where the human's still in the mix. And I like to think of that, augmentation kind of makes you faster, better, more accurate. It's like providing customer information to someone on the screen, and you can see those applications in HR. And then there is this idea of what we called reinvention, what I think of as kind of an exponential increase in what humans can do, where they become superhuman. So I think as this technology begins to emerge out there, one of the things I'm fascinated to see is how quickly do organizations and people on these talent marketplaces begin to see these kinds of patterns. And how quickly, I think, Karen, you did a beautiful job of talking about how the infrastructure of things like compliance and acceptability and familiarity, you can't start with a rocket shot to the moon. You kind of start where people are familiar. But as I've told you, Greg, I think this thing is going to just devour work as we know it. It's going to devour the work systems as we know it as people begin to get a taste of it. So in HR, and again, Karen and Greg both, I'd love to study this. As you begin to turn one of these marketplaces loose, as AI begins to do more skill inference about skills that haven't been measured, but that probably exist because you can predict them. And Greg, you and I have talked about what a neat feature that is of what you envision in the future. That's probably going to mean, to be edgy, that some things go away for those HR people that used to be the ones who measured those skills or used to put those jobs together or used to be the one that found the opportunity. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it's something that HR needs to be ready for and needs to be preparing now, in the same way that HR needs to be supporting the business as they figure out issues about replacement, augmentation, and reinvention.
Yeah, and John, I think as you bring those points up, couldn't agree more. And I really believe this is why this is actually more of a topic for HR to take on than perhaps technology, than perhaps the business. This is if you've been talking about it for a long time, this is the next frontier of how we as HR professionals get centered in the work of the work and help manage it and address this, along with our IT colleagues, along with our business colleagues, but as a full partner. And that's a big step up. That's a brand new domain that it's time to really jump into, maybe faster than we had expected.
Greg, sorry to interrupt. I just love how you put it at the end, because I think it is going to be a partnership. To put an edge on it, I don't think it's productive. I'm not saying you said this, but I hear a lot about, is this HR's chance to be upfront? Is this HR's chance to lead? Or is the CHRO the new CFO of the COVID crisis, et cetera? And that's all fine. I get that it starts a good discussion, et cetera. But I think the real work is going to be to create an even greater and tighter partnership across all those functions that have to do with automation, and to where it almost disappears. And no one's asking who's in the lead or who's got the authority.
Yeah, no, it's that partnership and being the an essential orchestrator of that on behalf of people. Karen, I'm gonna sort of ask a similar question. You work in a digital area. You work for an amazing technology company. What incremental steps have you taken to enable talent and employee experience capability with machine learning?
To enable talent capability with machine learning, we are going big with skills and experiences. The information that's captured during recruiting as the team member builds their talent profile, internal movement to new roles, completing gigs in the talent marketplace. This is all rich information captured in and growing the HCM. And with the new big enabler of machine learning, where a growing set of data can be powered by ML to help us discover, match, recommend, and plan. And with skills at the center and leveraging ML within the HR practices, such as candidate matching, gig or mentor recommendations, nudging a team member to complete an individual development plan, for example, or a business leader building and completing a strategic workforce plan, all are more activated and more powerful with ML.
Yeah, I tell you, for our audience, I know that there are some folks who are anxious about and need to be brave. And I would say at this point, no one braver than you all, and really no one more thoughtful. I am just so impressed at the intentionality by which you are approaching this work, the way you are working together across groups and being so incredibly thoughtful. So maybe just a few final questions here. Karen, I'll start with you. How have you seen some of the payoff of the work that you're doing around digital employee experience?
Well, and this is a good example of a partnership. It's not just HR. We had a digital employee experience strategy session a bit ago and brought together our IT partners, our marketing partners, our team member experience team, a Pandel set of subject matter experts and leaders who are passionate about this type of work, and came out of that session with a set of digital employee experience principles. And there's 5 of them. Design, driven by the team member experience. The access, streamlined and secure. That search and navigation, lead the team member to where they need to go. Content is always relevant and accurate. And then finally, success is defined by the team member experience. And so we take these principles and factor them into every new solution that we're shaping, any new small, medium, and large enhancement that we're making. And it's been fantastic. We define how we measure our team member experience during the solution design session. And we're continuously listening to our team members through usability studies, surveys, and focus group. And this feedback deeply informs what we deliver. Just a couple of examples. We're creating a leave of absence journey as we've listened to our team members who guide that they would like a more engaging and a simpler experience for this really important moment that matters. We are thinking about another example of a simple, and this is a simple example. We listened to our business leaders who asked for an easier way to deliver compensation statements. Boom, done. It's exciting to see where Workday may go with this capability, but it's not there yet. And so we've married these digital employee experience principles with our internal Workday product managers, our subject matter experts, and we've challenged them through an innovation challenge hackathon where we're asking them, help us. Here's the feedback that we've received. Where can we expand the experience to meet the customer needs? Where can we leverage the Workday Prism solution, the Workday worksheet solution, to be able to bring in the right market data, peer data. And so that's a fantastic way to really capitalize on our experts of Workday professionals to help us make the overall end-to-end experience better.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love those examples. We happen to at Workday do something called the Wow Us Award. So Workday on Workday, and we give that out to our HR professionals by doing something extraordinary that either automates, augments, or elevates human performance by using the technology. And the creative applications are so cool. And then we have a big celebration and a presentation. It's sort of our version of sort of Shark Tank, if you will, for the Wow Us Awards. John, I'm going to give you the last word, if I may. what advice or coaching would you give to our audience as they think about this space?
Well, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you, Karen. I don't know where to start hearing about all the great things that you're doing. But I'll just say initially, Greg, that I think there is an invention and agility process to this. And so I think one of the things is to get very comfortable with a kind of constant deconstruction and reconstruction, get very comfortable with input from your constituents, and comfortable with kind of agile development. I think Karen described it well. Putting things out there, asking your constituents, fixing things as you go. So I think in terms of advice, one of them is get agile, and really, as Karen described it, really in the nature and in the basics of what you do. The other one I've talked about, I think, be brave and get ready to deconstruct both your people into things like skills and your work into things like tasks. But one of the things I've said is that these engines, these talent marketplaces, may start to devour job descriptions, because a leader is going to, at some point put their job description in there, and it's going to get taken apart and turned into potential projects and gigs. And once that starts to happen, I think, Greg, we're going to see this deconstruction idea really begin to move through. There's lots of work that's going to be perfectly fine in traditional jobs and traditional job holders, but deconstruction is the second one that I would talk about. And then the third one, maybe more timely, I'm writing a lot of blogs about this, is not to waste a crisis. I'm not sure I love that quote. It seems a little heartless, but there are real opportunities here to showcase these trends that we've been talking about, and these trends have really been amplified by COVID. We're talking about, in a sense, kind of the gigification of work. Again, I'd rather use deconstruction, but that's out there. And so there's that one. There's the involvement of your constituents. There's the opening up of things that you never thought you had to address. Leave of absences become, I think, much more obvious to people once you've made them remote. And once they're creating work at their home, maybe much more than when they were coming into an office, just to take one example from what Karen talked about. So, Greg, I think it's really an opportunity for HR to look around right now and make sure that they capture the lessons that their organizations are learning right now, so that they don't snap back to something that's the same or maybe even worse as the pressure of the crisis subsides.
Yeah, no, thank you, my friend. Well, especially in today's world, we need beacons and blueprints for navigating the changing world. I can't thank Karen and John enough for not only their wisdom today, but for giving us both those blueprints and for being beacons during these incredibly challenging times. Thank you all for joining us, and John and Karen, thank you again so much.